Hello there good people, what is up? Welcome, my name is Marco and I'm a full stack developer, and today I wanted to share some of the most crazy and difficult things I found while learning JavaScript. Now a bit of a backstory here. I come from Python. I love it, I think it's the best, and it's the one that I've been using most often. But then I wanted to expand my horizon and learn web development. We all know that JavaScript is the best for that. So I learned JavaScript. But there were certain things that, for a Pythonista like myself, were really difficult, and others that I still don't get why or when or where. To be totally clear, these are not difficult or crazy in an absolute meaning. They are relative to my experience and my background as a Python developer. Let's start with number one. Async await. Asynchronous code is the thing in JavaScript. It was born for web development, and as soon as you pick it up, you realize why it is so important. There are so many events triggering at the same time when loading a web page that if each one were to run synchronously, the page probably would load, I don't know, tomorrow. So of course the difficulty with asynchronous code is quite obvious. The main reason is that it doesn't exist in Python. It's not a thing. On day one, you learn that the code runs from top to bottom, and that's it. But my main issue was mainly one, and that is promises. Now, a promise is an interesting object. Hey, take this. It's not what you expect, but if you wait a minute, it will be. So the compiler, while running, has something in return. It's definitely not what you expect. Maybe you expect a string or a list of numbers, but it's still something. And when the promise is resolved, well, it can go back and return the real thing. This way there is no blocking code and it's way more efficient. Where is the problem then? Well, not all asynchronous functions return promises. Some need to be promisified. You just wrap the return value into a promise, and that's the trick. But this is crazy to me, because why would you have asynchronous code that doesn't return a promise? This has caused me so many troubles and so many headaches. Trying to debug stuff, I was using the good old console log statement, and while logging I could see that the value I was tracking, it was undefined. Why is it undefined? Because the log function runs before your asynchronous code, but if there is no promise, you're not even gonna log that. Absurd. Callbacks. This goes similarly to asynchronous code. There are some callbacks functions in Python, but they are completely different, and they are used for different purposes. But it makes sense. I mean, hey function, when you're done doing that, run this other function. What is not normal is the level of nesting these callbacks can get to. Because now you can have the first function or the parent function that has a callback, and that callback function has another callback function, and that one as well has another callback function, just on and on. But what's scarier for me with this callback function is that I had no idea about the arguments, because a callback takes whatever the parent function returns. But that's a problem. I had no idea what it returned. In my mind, I thought I had to learn all the return values of every function, and that is not ideal at all. Take for example the map function or the filter or reduce for arrays. They take a function and they pass in the index, the array itself, and the single item. But if you don't, it doesn't matter. And this introduces my next point, arguments. If you have ever used or played with Python, I think we can agree that it is kind of a tyrannical language, for a purpose of course. There are a lot of standards, a lot of rules, and even the slightest thing can just cause an error. Arguments are one of those things. If you use a function that takes two arguments and you just give one, you are gonna get that good old type error. 2 arguments expected, or argument missing. Memories. JavaScript is more of a chill and relaxed, kind of a Matthew McConaughey type. You create a function that takes 2 arguments and you just pass one in, no problem. Nothing happens. Cool, right? Not really. That argument could be very important for the correct execution of the function. And if you don't provide it, the function won't behave the way you intended to, the way you wrote it for. Prototype. This is super confusing. I mean, Python is the object-oriented programming language, in my opinion. There's Java, sure, applause, and C++, I guess. But creating objects in Python is super easy and so natural. Now, talking about objects in classes, you might end up on the topic of inheritance. Well, no problem. In Python, you just specify the class you want to inherit from, and you can give it more than one. And then it comes JavaScript with its prototype? To be completely honest, I still haven't figured it out yet. I mean, it's so confusing. What is that for, or why would you use it? It basically refers to the original object, and if you want to override a method, you need to call that prototype. To me, it's just overcomplicating it. For loops. For loops in Python are super simple. The syntax is for item in a collection of items, do something. Just like this, you can access the item itself, like a name or a number. In JavaScript, it works like this. For let I equals 0, I less than array.length, I++, and then you can do something. You don't have access to the object, but you're given a counter. Yay! And you have to use that counter to point at the item you want to pick. This wasn't immediate for me when I switched languages. However, in my opinion, it comes from a habit which is quite common in Python that belongs to core developers. So basically those developers that work on the language. And that is the habit of badly naming things. We want to talk about lambda. What is that? Couldn't you just name it like generic function or something? No, lambda, because people need to know that I've studied Greek in high school. A for loop in Python should actually be named a for each loop, because the correct way to implement a for loop is what JavaScript does, giving you a counter and then you use that to point at different things. So I think JavaScript wins this one. Bravo. Undefined or null. Okay, so if you return a blank in Python and print it, it will print none. So when it's not specified, you get none. If you did the same thing in JavaScript, you will get an undefined. Great. So none and undefined are the same thing, right? What is null then? It must be something else. Let's see. What? Brackets. This is super debatable. But Python uses indentation to separate logic blocks, whereas JavaScript uses brackets. Personally, I prefer indentation because it's very elegant and your code will look very tidy without any prettier or prettify, and it's way more legible. You can have a super nested thing. You always know what is inside this block and inside that block, etc. But learning brackets was challenging for me, especially considering the super convoluted nesting structure you can end up with. And it's no wonder there are VS Code extensions to color pairing brackets. Sometimes it's the only way to solve a bug. Slicing arrays. This is weird. In Python, if you want to slice arrays, which are called lists but are the same thing, you just need to type something like this. Your list, in square brackets, you give a start and an end, and you can also give it a step. Something like this, for example, will reverse the entire list. Isn't it beautiful? And then there's JavaScript. If you print like array, square brackets, 0, it works. It prints the first item. Yoo-hoo! So if I do this, I should get the first 2 items. Wrong. You have to use a method called slice. You give it a start and an end, and it does it. Fine, okay, my problem is not with the method, but my problem with this is that it creates another array. This is not good, because now I have a new object. Not much for memory management. Truthy and Falsy. Have you ever tried something like this? Or like this? What do you expect they return? False? Undefined? What? This is devil's work! There were so many questions popping in my head when I had to learn this concept of truthy and falsy. These are not the Boolean values for true and false, but these are elements that get evaluated as true or false, like 0, an empty string, or an empty array. This is madness. An empty string is still a string. An empty array, it is still an array. Type here is important. I guess the original creator of JavaScript realized this probably when one of them tried to add 2 plus 2 and got back 22. So they decided to solve it with something that, again, is kind of a punch in the eye for a Pythonista like myself. And that is triple equal. Now, in virtually all programming languages, one equal is for assignment. You are basically telling the machine, hey look, x is equal to 5, okay? Remember it, store it somewhere. When I ask again, it's 5, okay? Then there is the double equal, which is comparison. So you're basically asking the machine, hey, is x equal to 5? And the computer will say, yes, I remembered. In JavaScript, there is also a triple equal. What is that, you might ask? Well, types are not really JavaScript's strongest suit. I guess this is why TypeScript was created. But you could have a true statement for something like this. Awkward. There is something fundamentally wrong with this, and Python knows it well. One is a string and the other is a number. Of course they're not equal. What are you asking?
How dare you?
But not JavaScript. If you really wanted to check equality, like type-wise, you need to use the triple equal. Things weren't difficult enough. And you might think this is trivial, but personal experience says it's not. Take a user input, for example, or a query parameter in a URL. They are strings. Even if you type 7, it's always a string. Now let's try and do something with it. Like, I don't know, add 20 to it so that I can get to that point in that collection. Whatever. What I want is 27. But what I got is an array out of bounds. How is that possible? Well, you figure it out. Alright guys, thank you very much for watching. Again, if you like this video, please leave a like and comment down below. Tell me what you think, what the most difficult steps were when you had to learn any language. But for this video, it's all. Please make sure to subscribe not to miss a single episode of my new Milestone Project series, and I'll see you at the next one. As always, stay tuned for more, and bye bye.